Imagine waking up one morning, only to have the person you trusted most in the world kick you out of your own home. No money, no plan, and nowhere to go. What would you do? I had to make a choice that would change everything. I used my father's old bank card, and what happened next completely shocked me. It all started on a normal Tuesday morning. I woke up, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and went about my routine like any other day. Little did I know, my life was about to take a turn I could never have imagined. My husband, whom I had trusted and loved for over a decade, had made a decision that would shake the very foundation of my world. Without warning, without a word of warning, he told me to pack my things and leave. Just like that, my home, the place I had built my life in, was no longer mine. I remember standing there, stunned, staring at the bags I had thrown together in a haze. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it was all swirling inside me. How could someone I trusted so completely, someone I called my partner, treat me this way? My mind raced with questions, but there were no answers coming. I didn't have anywhere to go immediately. I had friends, of course, but I wanted a little time to think, to figure out my next steps. In that moment, I realized I didn't have access to any money. My husband had always controlled the finances, claiming it was for my own good, but now I understood it was control, plain and simple. I had a bank card, yes, but it was useless. The account had no funds. Panic set in. How would I pay for a taxi, for food, for a place to sleep? I felt trapped, desperate, and for the first time, completely alone. Then, as I dug through my thoughts, I remembered something. Years ago, when I was in college and struggling financially, my father had given me an old bank card of his with a small balance, just to help me get by. I had never needed it again, but it was still tucked away in a drawer at my parents' house. I had no other choice. That card became my lifeline. I borrowed it from my father, feeling a pang of guilt, but also relief. Finally, some sense of control returned. I could buy food, pay for a hotel for the night, and start figuring out my next steps. I went to the nearest grocery store, my hands shaking as I handed over the card to the cashier. I expected a simple transaction, maybe a slight raise of the eyebrow from someone curious about the sudden influx of items for a woman who looked clearly distressed. What I did not expect was the reaction that came next. The card was declined. My heart sank. I thought maybe my father had used it recently, or perhaps the bank had canceled it. But then the cashier, looking a bit flustered, told me that the bank had put a special alert on the card. My father's bank, it turned out, had flagged any unusual activity immediately. They knew the card was being used far from his usual location and in ways that didn't match his normal spending pattern. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just embarrassment. This was confusion mixed with fear. Would the bank call the police? Would they accuse me of theft? I tried to explain that I had my father's permission, that I was using it out of necessity, but the teller shook her head apologetically. She told me to contact the bank directly. I took a deep breath and called my father. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, I had to use your old card. The bank won't let me. They're asking for verification." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a sigh. "I thought I warned you about that card. They do monitor it closely," he said. But then he added, gently, "Don't worry, I'll sort it out. Just hang tight." I spent the next hour pacing my tiny hotel room, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The bank had my father on the phone, asking security questions, confirming my identity, and verifying that he had indeed authorized me to use the card. I could hear snippets of the conversation from my end, and it felt surreal. Here I was, an adult woman, caught in a situation where my financial independence had evaporated overnight, relying on a card from years ago just to survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my father hung up and told me the card was ready to be used. Relief flooded through me. I went back to the store and tried again. This time, the transaction went through. I could feel my hands shaking, but for the first time that day, I felt hope. That night, sitting in my hotel room with a small meal I had bought, I reflected on the situation. I realized how vulnerable I had become without financial independence, how easily someone could take away your stability, your sense of security, just by cutting off access to money. And I realized something else, too. I had allowed myself to be in a situation where I had no control. That needed to change. Over the next few days, I started to rebuild. I contacted my father's bank to understand all the security measures in place, how I could avoid any future issues, and whether there were accounts I could open that would give me access without depending on anyone else. I also reached out to friends, made arrangements for temporary housing, and slowly began to piece my life back together. The incident with the bank, however, left a lasting impression. It wasn't just about embarrassment or inconvenience. It was a lesson in preparedness, in autonomy. I realized that relying on someone else for financial security, even a spouse, could leave you powerless in the worst moments. And I knew I would never allow myself to be in that position again. As I started to regain my footing, I also began to see the situation more clearly. My husband's actions were not just cruel, they were controlling. By taking away my access to money, he had attempted to control my freedom. It was a sobering realization, but it also ignited something in me: determination. I refused to be a victim. I would reclaim my independence, my dignity, and my life. I began researching ways to secure my finances. I opened my own bank account in my name with no joint access. I set up online banking, automatic payments for essential bills, and a small emergency fund. I also sought advice from financial advisors and support groups for women in similar situations. Every step I took, I felt stronger, more capable, more in control. One day, while reviewing my finances, I thought back to the moment the bank had initially blocked my father's card. It had been a shocking reaction, yes, but in hindsight, I understood why. Banks are designed to protect account holders from fraud, and in that moment, I had unknowingly triggered a security system that was working exactly as it should. It was a strange mix of gratitude and frustration. Gratitude because it meant my father's money was safe. Frustration because it highlighted how vulnerable I had been. I also learned an important lesson about communication. If I had been open with my father from the start, explaining my situation in detail, the process might have been smoother. But even then, I realized that sometimes life throws challenges at you without warning, and you have to think on your feet, even if it means bending the rules slightly to survive. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I found a new place to live, started looking for work that would give me independence, and surrounded myself with supportive friends and family. The experience with the bank and my father's card became a turning point, a story I would tell myself whenever I felt powerless. It was a reminder that resilience is built in moments of crisis. I also began to reflect on my marriage, on the choices I had made, and on the patterns that had allowed me to be in such a vulnerable position. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had to acknowledge the reality of my situation, not sugarcoat it or make excuses. Only then could I move forward with clarity and strength. One evening, as I sat in my small but cozy apartment, enjoying a cup of tea, I realized how far I had come. From being kicked out, financially stranded, and emotionally shattered, I had navigated my way to stability. I had turned a moment of crisis into a lesson in self-reliance and empowerment. And while the memory of that morning, standing in the living room, stunned, with my bags in hand, would always linger, it no longer held power over me. In fact, that experience changed the way I approached life entirely. I began to plan for the unexpected, to save diligently, and to ensure that I would never be in a position where someone else could control my access to basic necessities. I also became more empathetic, understanding that many people face similar challenges, but may not have the support or resources to navigate them. The bank's initial reaction, which had once shocked and terrified me, eventually became a story I could tell with a sense of humor and perspective. It was a reminder that even in moments of extreme vulnerability, there are systems in place to protect, and sometimes the shock you feel is just life nudging you toward greater awareness and preparedness. Looking back, I realized that what had felt like an insurmountable crisis was actually a catalyst for growth. I had learned lessons about financial literacy, independence, resilience, and self-respect that I would carry with me forever. The journey was painful, yes, but it was transformative. And now, as I reflect on everything, I want to share this story. Not for pity or sympathy, but to inspire anyone who might be facing a similar challenge. Life can change in an instant. People you trust can disappoint you. Systems can fail you. But your ability to adapt, to seek help, and to reclaim your power, that is something no one can take away. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel powerless, remember my story. Remember the moment I used my father's old card and faced the bank's shock. Remember the fear, the panic, and the eventual triumph. Life will test you, sometimes in ways that seem cruel, but within those tests lie the seeds of your strength. You are capable of more than you realize. You are resilient, resourceful, and deserving of independence. And sometimes, the very moments that shock and scare you are the ones that teach you the most profound lessons about yourself. Thank you for spending your time here, where every story reminds us how powerful the truth can be. If you want more deep, moving, and eye-opening real-life stories, make sure you stick with us. There's so much more to tell. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, every story has a moment that changes everything.